I think a lot of the best consumer brands come out of an individual desire for a product that doesn't exist or that could be better. I do feel fortunate that the first one was the one that really hit. There's two paths, obviously, right? There's the path where you raise investor capital, and there's the path where you don't. And so when you go down that venture path, like, you're really either setting yourself up for the craziest exit or nothing at all. My board didn't want me to sell, for example. Like, I had to pretty much convince them and pressure them to sell because they wanted that higher return. So we got that initial LOI, and it was obviously lower than we had wanted. I would take on an alter ego. Like, I would do this practice, the 15 minutes before call, and put myself into this different mindset. I had always this deep pressure. I didn't realize that I could live without that. It took me about 8 months after the sale for it to really finally go away. And I kind of felt this freedom.
What if tattoos didn't have to be forever? That question led brothers Tyler and Krystyn Handley to create Inkbox, a brand that made semi-permanent tattoos cool and eventually caught the attention of global giant BIC, the pen company. In 2022, BIC acquired Inkbox in a deal worth $65 million. And today, Tyler shares how Inkbox went from an idea sparked in the jungle to a cultural movement, and what it's really like to sell the company you've built. From the rush of the early success to the reality of deal negotiations to the challenges that come after an exit. This is Tyler Handley's story. And Tyler, it is a true honor to be able to share this story. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. And what an intro. Wow. You're such a natural at this.
Thank you.
No wonder you're doing podcasts. I tried myself and I was like, I'm more of the person being interviewed, not the interviewer.
And so humble. When you hear your story shared like that, I'm curious, thinking back to the very origins of when you started. And now you're here, post-exit, you're in your music studio. We were chatting about all the hobbies you've designed and how you're allocating your time. Man, is it surprising to you that you're here? You're to look back on younger you starting Inkbox?
You just said I was humble, and my answer to this question is actually no. So,
go on.
Yeah, I kind of always knew I would be successful in in a business sense, and that's something we can get into. There's obviously different types of success, right? But I always knew. I think I had this deep yearning for challenge and adversity and just kind of pushing through things and figuring things out and building and creating. And yeah, I just always loved that kind of stuff. And so I always knew that it would work for me someday. And I do feel fortunate that the first one was the one that really hit, because having started another company now, it's like, oh man, I have a lot to live up to. So
right. Could I do it again? Right. That question. Well, and just the playbook, just what I'm hearing there is that your core mindset and mental model is I am going to learn. I'm going to get the knowledge. I heard you say knowledge about that year of the build. And I'm resilient enough to keep going until I figure it out. And you did figure it out on your first go. What was the origin of that story? I've read about it online. You and your brother in the jungle discover this kind of plant-based ink that eventually became the product that you took to market and created a movement around. What was that first moment like, that discovery?
Yeah, so, I think a lot of the best consumer brands come out of an individual desire for a product that doesn't exist or that could be better. It's just these personal frustrations you have, and you're like, well, I can figure this out. Why has no one done this? It's ridiculous. And it was the same thing for me. I was 25 at the time, and it was in that kind of transitionary stage in my life where I'd moved back to Toronto, and I wanted a tattoo. And people often get tattoos in these transitory moments of their lives. And I wanted this particular design, but I'm like, I don't know if I can commit to this one forever. It was something that I knew I'd regret. I have many now, permanent ones, but at the time, I feel like I didn't know myself enough. And so I was like, I'd love to test this beforehand. So started playing around with temporary tattoos, and very quickly just realized they were just for kids. They weren't cool enough for me to wear as someone in their mid-20s and kind of feel confident wearing it,
Yeah.
And just after a few weeks of research, just came across this fruit that these tribes in the jungles of Panama and Peru were using to dye their skin in these ceremonial rituals. And so tried to figure out how to get it, but couldn't couldn't figure it out. Like it just wasn't importable. And
Hmm.
so I had told my brother about the idea at the time. We decided to do it together, and yeah, we ended up getting in contact with this guy who lives among the tribes down in this region of Panama called the Darien. And so we're like, hey, can we come down and see this stuff? And he's like, yeah, sure, we'll host you. So we went down to this region of Panama, and it was pretty funny because you kind of enter this region, and they don't have military there. Actually, they have like military, they have police. Yeah, but anyways, we spent a week with these tribes, and they kind of did all the rituals with us, and it was really cool to see how they used it. And we realized that in its state that they used it was not suitable for what we did, but obviously there was something going on in the composition, the chemical composition of this fruit that we could use. And so we brought some of it back with us and got some chemists involved and realized that, there's this active ingredient in there that we could actually get from a different area, from a different plant at scale, and then use that, kind of build upon that. And that's kind of where the inspiration for the technology of the product came from.
Incredible. And so you had this idea, you had this itch where you wanted to find your own way of having a temporary tattoo that wasn't, from like a kid's carnival essentially, and
Mhm.
and really something that was more um, modern and fresh. And so it was just from a kind of the origin story. When did it go from like being this experiment, this early thought experiment to no, there's something here. Let's invest, let's get behind this, let's bet on
Mhm.
this.
So I think I advise founders typically on this that you just talk to people initially. You just
Hmm.
kind of tell people your idea. Like, what do you think? Would you buy something like this? Do you think people would? And you just get a feel. People ask you questions. You start to refine your idea more just through conversation. That's very helpful. And, I started to feel like, okay, this might be a thing. It's validating my own judgment, which is you got to
Yeah.
kind of validate your own judgment sometimes. And then for us, it was when we launched on Kickstarter. It's the challenge with any consumer brand is just how do you get in front of people, especially in this attention economy. And Kickstarter back in like 2015, 2016 was a really effective way to get in front of a large audience of potential buyers for a new innovative product. So we took like literally half of that, put it to our Kickstarter, and we were just giving 20s to people at DMZ and like just walk around like, hey, go back us, like go back us, and kind of try to game the algorithm a bit. But it was after the first week there where we hit like I think it was like $40,000 in one day. And I
Wow.
remember my brother and I were just like, "Oh, okay, yeah,
Let's
there's
go.
something here, yeah."
And what was that like? So you find the demand. Whoa, demand is here. Hello. So your hunch was right on scratching your own itch. There's other folks who had a similar want, desire. What was it like to fulfill those first orders? What was challenging? What was hard about that? Or was it easy? Was it a walk in the park?
No, it's a lot of figuring stuff out, really. It's a lot of
Yeah.
problem solving. Just we didn't know what to do, right? So it was
Yeah.
every day it was constantly like, how do we figure this out? It now is so much easier with chat or something like with AI, Gemini, you just be like, hey, how do I do this? But before that, it
Totally.
was like you kind of had to figure it out.
Totally. Well, and you're constantly in problem solving mode. But to take this raw material that you found in the jungles in South America to the hands of a consumer to build that supply chain, what was that experience like? That would be challenging.
Yeah, again, had no idea what I was doing. We knew we needed like it to be on some sort of like patch that you could apply on your skin. Like, okay, who
Yeah.
makes things that stick on the skin? And it's like 3M. 3M makes Band-Aids and all this stuff. So Band-Aids is the first thing we're thinking of, like, who makes Band-Aids? And so just honestly started reaching out to random people, like not random, but like people I thought kind of would know what they're talking about at 3M. Got some responses, and then from there, they were like, okay, actually, you need to talk to this manufacturer. This is like, we don't use them, but like you could use these people. Like this is what they make. And then it just snowballs. So like you kind of have to just go out and we would find someone to talk to. They might not know the answer, but they knew who would. And
Right.
so just through that iteration, we would figure things out.
Knowing what you didn't know and then seeking advice. And then you did very much figure it out. And you got to a point where you've started to scale, you get to the exit phase. And something we talk a lot about with folks is the idea that an exit is more than a transaction. There is a
Hmm.
phase of building where you're preparing for that, for a
Hmm.
strategic exit, right? That's more in control for you
Hmm.
versus one that happens to you, because every founder will exit.
Hmm.
Um, what was that journey like, scaling it and then getting it to that exit point with Bic?
Um, I mean, scaling it was just a lot of slog, to be
Mm,
honest. It always felt like we were pushing and pushing and pushing. And then for maybe 2 years, it felt like we were being pulled along from the markets. And that was COVID. I think COVID actually was,
yeah.
really good for the business because a lot of people were bored at home. They were buying products like ours. And so we just ramped like crazy during COVID. And that's when I think people started to reach out to us. And Vic had reached out, the CEO had reached out personally to me. And we just kind of had chats here and there until one day he was like, I want to buy you. And I was like, okay, let me talk to my board. And then,
Wow.
it went from there.
And so did you see an exit path from the moment you started building? Was that always part of your longer term vision?
I mean, as a venture-backed business, yes, but it wasn't always exactly clear who would buy our product. We were kind of unique in the sense that we developed some new technology for the skin, this new nascent category of tattoos, which hadn't really been touched upon in the beauty sector much. I mean,
Mm,
Kat Von D, for example, who was a famous tattoo artist from Miami Ink, I think. She had created a beauty brand kind of framed around tattoos, but like they were still just a beauty brand, right?
right.
We were actually like we had some new product innovation and stuff, and so there's actually an interesting point in the evolution of Inkbox where the initial vision I had for it was very fully vertically integrated across the tattoo space, and
Mm,
that meant we were a marketplace for discovering tattoos, testing them,
interesting.
educating consumers on them, and then matching them with artists locally to book said tattoos, and we would take a cut of those. So that was always my initial vision for Inkbox, and yeah, and so the brand really shifted to focus on treating the product more like a replenishable beauty accessory.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing is you started from like a tactic perspective. I'm hearing you started thinking about the universe of potential buyers who would buy the
Mhm.
company. And then thinking about perhaps some of the reasons why Inkbox could be positioned very attractively. And so it
Exactly.
shifted from this ecosystem partnership play to the physical tattoo kind of space to, hey, this is a replenishable product that is a brand new category for someone to enter. This is a new vertical that they could sell to either their existing base or a net new target market to reach. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a very attractive proposition. Did that change the way when you were thinking about strategic bets or decisions in the business? Did that change the way you thought about your focus and what you chose to say yes to versus no to during that build?
Oh yeah, changed a lot of things. How we
Yeah.
positioned the brand, for example, um, how we talked about the product,
Yeah.
target customers, even like we actually started targeting younger,
Interesting.
just because they were more active beauty buyers and consumers. Who we collabed with was another, like it really affected everything. Yeah.
The entire business model, the entire strategy for the
Mhm.
business, customer facing materials. What was it just in terms of timing, pre exit? How when did you start to think differently about that? Was it a few years before?
That was probably in 2018, 2019, after our Series A investment. And that's when, like, once you raise a Series A, it's like, okay, you have your investors are on your board. Like, it becomes, they become really involved and
Right.
they have power, which, they don't before necessarily. So that's when things really started to change for us.
This is a really important point just around who you bring during this pre exit phase onto
Mhm.
the team. Outside capital being a core driver, especially in consumer products when you're having to build and create inventory. There's a lot of capital involved in scaling a brand like this to the level that you did. If
Mhm.
you think back, if you think about the D2C Canadian founders who are building right now, um, what advice would you have for them about that specific part of the journey, about maybe investor selection or thinking about how to get to the level that you did in your build?
Yeah, I would say there's two paths, obviously, right? There's
Yeah.
and there's well, there's many more paths than two, but broadly speaking, under umbrella terms, there's two, right? There's the path where you raise investor capital, and there's the path where you don't. And in that path where you don't, you might still raise a little bit of money from private individuals, some angels,
Right.
but that's very different than raising from institutions
Mm,
because institutions have internal rates of return they need to hit. They're placing lots of bets, and you're either going to be a 10xer or a zero, right? They don't really have a lot of
right.
appetite for the in between. And
Right.
that's what kills a lot of brands, specifically in the consumer space, because it's really hard to 10x investments in the consumer space. Um, it's a physical product, right? It doesn't have the
Right.
scale and trajectory of a software product, which at the time in 2015 was kind of like the the genesis of what we call D2C, direct to consumer commerce, cutting out the middleman, right? And it was like all these big companies being launched and working with the mattress for everybody, or like,
Yeah.
and very few of them were successful because they raised all this capital and pretended they were SaaS companies. But at the end of the day, you're throwing around physical products. It's very different.
Margins
And
are so much
yeah,
thinner
and the margins are so much
than
slimmer.
90%, 95%. Yeah.
So yeah, it's crazy. Such a huge difference, right? And you have to get
Yeah.
customers to repeat and repeat. Um, they're not locked in on a subscription, so it's very different. And so when you go down that venture path, like you're really either setting yourself up for the craziest exit or nothing at all. And there's really
Jeez.
not a lot of appetite in between. It can happen, like we were in the in between, but like it's pretty rare. Like my board didn't want me to sell, for example. Like I had to pretty much like convince them and like pressure them to sell because they wanted that higher return. And
Right.
if you go down the other path, you just have a lot more control. But I would say the benefits of the venture route, especially if you're like inexperienced, is the network. So I always knew that I was trading equity in the business for the network that I would get through the connections. And I met some amazing people. It got me great hires. Like that does a lot for you, and it's not talked about a lot.
And that component there, like the relational capital that builds companies that a lot of folks don't necessarily think about, and the knowledge that you're going to be able to access, back to kind of the key theme that I'm hearing through your story, accessing that knowledge to be able to accelerate the growth of the business.
Hmm.
Also, stepping into a decision point with you and your brother, going like, do we take this first round, this first check, this first
Hmm.
external capital? We own all of it, and now we're going to trade off some of it on the bet of a bigger thing, this all or nothing kind of mentality you're talking about, this risk tolerance that I'm hearing for you as well. What was that moment like when you decided, this is the path we're taking. We're
That was
choosing
easy.
this.
Yeah, it was easy
Yeah.
at that point. I think,
Yeah.
there is a starry-eyed kind of
Yeah.
magnificence to it where you're young, you're inexperienced, but someone's betting on you, and you're like, okay,
Hell
sweet.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
And we had some people try to bet on us where there were like really sharky deals where like, are you
Mm.
kidding me? Like, get out of here. Like people trying to take advantage of you kind of. Um, so I think being a good judge of character is important there, and being able to back channel and ask different people their opinions on other people was important. But I think there was no hesitation in us taking capital because we knew we didn't know anything. Like we knew we needed the connections, the network. Um, I don't even think it was like any sort of like cognitive thought about that. It was just like a deep understanding that like something we knew we needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you went for it. And
Yeah.
so getting to the deal, and then I really want to focus on what I don't know if I've seen. I've sort of dug up as much research as I could pre here, but just on life after and kind of what
Hmm.
that feels like. And that's where a lot of exit stories kind of fall flat, where you hear about the transaction, you see the headlines, but there's a deeply human aspect to this.
Hmm.
And so I'd love to spend time there, but getting to the deal, it sounds like you were extremely strategic, very precise. You worked with your board to really outline these potential buyers. You built the company and structured it in that way, in a very systematic way, from what I'm
Hmm.
hearing.
Hmm.
Um, and then you had an inbound interest from someone who, from Bick, from the CEO himself, you'd built a connection with. His key message: people buy from people, and that includes companies. All
Mm.
of a sudden, he comes knocking and he says, here's my interest. What ensued from there to get to the transaction close? What was that like, that phase?
Yeah. So, typically you'd get a banker or someone to run a process for you. And when you have a successful company, bankers will just always reach out to you. So I knew some. So I started talking to a few. And my board was like, hold up, hold up. Like, chill for a second here. Like, let's not have a banker. Like, we know what we're doing. Like, we can help you. Like, we don't need to pay the transaction fee. Like, we'll do it with you. And so they helped me negotiate. I was kind of new to that. So that was very helpful. Um, but yeah, basically, hey, we want to buy you. Okay, let me talk to my board. Board's like, okay, let's let's look at the deal. Like they'll give you a letter of intent usually, and that'll have a figure attached to it typically. And as you can guess, the figure was probably too low initially. So we got that initial LOI, and it was obviously lower than we had wanted. And then the negotiation.
Sharpen your pencils is what I
Yeah,
hear a lot. There's a lot of terms
yeah,
in M&A, and that's a classic one. So yes, please come back.
yeah. So it's like, okay, how do we get this up?
Yeah.
Essentially. So it became,
Yeah.
and there was about we ran a bit of a process. So it was like a couple months of negotiation with them. And in that process of negotiation, I was like, okay, the backup here is I don't want to run a process for other acquirers right now. The thinking was this is an interesting one, but at the same time, we could run a process for a new round of investment. So we had two funds. We received term sheets from two other funds for like Series B investment.
Mm.
So that was like not really our backup. There's two options, right? And
Yep.
if we couldn't get the deal up over a certain point, then we're going to go the investment route. Yeah. So diligence,
Interesting.
the before the diligence started, I think the next steps really for me were talking to other people on the big team. So basically their entire senior leadership team I was having one-on-ones with just to get like you said, people buy from people. It was like getting to know the people, like they were
Yeah.
getting a gut check on me and my team. And then it kind of spreads from there, right? It's not just me now. Then it's my CTO, it's my COO, it's my CFO, my co-founder. Like everyone starts having calls with counterparts across their team just to build some rapport. And, they're doing diligence at that point, right? And then after we had negotiated, after I think it was 3 months of negotiation, we got to a point where we were both comfortable. And then the real diligence started uh, where they look at every aspect of your business. And you can imagine because they are a publicly traded company and a French publicly traded company at that. Very, very deep, deep diligence. I felt really bad for my CFO who was handling all the diligence.
No kidding. Oh,
Yeah.
I believe the average M&A deal is around 1,500 hours for an M&A advisor or banker to be pulling off
Wow.
on behalf. I'm sure
Wow.
it felt like, so what was the phase? How long was it for you to go
Six
through from
months.
the moment? 6 months. Okay. So
Hmm.
typical, that's just for folks listening, that's kind of like a good length of time. Typically it's 9 to 12 months, but 6 months, it's pretty quick.
Hmm.
What was that? What did it feel like for you
Oh,
personally?
super nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Uh, and just tense the whole time because it's not just about you, right? Like you have your own desires here. You see I didn't grow up with money, right? And so like seeing the amounts that I could have gotten, I was like, oh, okay, like this becomes pretty
Wow.
attractive and enticing, but you're trying to separate yourself from that, being like, okay, but I could get more, So it's
Yeah.
like you're trying to be as bold as possible because it's very rare to be in this situation. So you're really trying to take advantage of the
Yeah.
moment.
Completely. And you can't, we always say you can't time capital markets, but there's only a few factors in your control. So when you think about what was in your
Mm.
control at that moment, you're still having to demonstrate growth all the way
Hmm.
through those six
Yeah, you're
months.
running a
It's a
business at the same
dance.
time, so
What was that
every
like?
month is so important.
Did you have to compartmentalize? Like what was helpful for you personally to get through those 6 months? Keep
Yeah, I had
yourself
a coach.
grounded.
Yeah, I had a coach. She was very, very helpful. One
Awesome.
exercise that I really found a lot of benefit in was I forget what the method is called, but basically creating an alter ego for yourself before big
Mm,
calls. So before a big call, diligence call, or call about, negotiating on the deal, I would take on an alter ego. Like I would do this practice, like the 15 minutes before a call, and put myself into this different mindset. And my mindset was as a Canadian, and this podcast is focused on Canadian founders, you'll
yes.
often hear as a Canadian that you're not as bold or visionary or aggressive as your American founder,
Ambitious.
ambitious as
Yeah. We are
American
ambitious, FYI. Yeah.
we are as your American counterparts. And there is some truth to that. Like we are typically just a little nicer. Like it is the truth. Like we in conversations, you can kind of tell when people people are Canadian the way they're presenting things. They're not like
Mm,
I don't know. I think of Palmer Luckey, for example, founder of Anduril and VR stuff before that. Like he is such a typical American founder to me. Like he just sells some crazy visionary future. He's a little obtuse and weird and like in Canada, we're a lot more grounded as entrepreneurs. We're not, we
Yeah.
don't sell the sky. We're like, let's take a step first,
Right.
And
Right.
so I had to put myself in this mindset where I was more like, I would say like an American founder, like really
Interesting.
bold, a little more
Yeah.
aggressive, being like, being comfortable on a call, being like, that's just simply not enough. And being like, I don't know where we go from here. And that's all I'm saying. Like,
And
yeah,
hold the silence,
yeah,
the
and hold.
pause.
And
Yes.
honestly, but one thing, one quote I love about silence is that silence builds tension, and tension's great because tension holds up the Golden Gate Bridge.
I
Yeah.
love that.
So
I love
I
that.
was actually purposefully trying to create tension in my negotiating calls, and that was really tough because I don't like conflict, and so
Yeah.
I was purposely trying to create like a little bit without being mean or ill-willed. It was just like, no.
Well
Yeah.
done. And no is one of the most powerful words in the English language that we should use more often.
Hmm.
And, thinking about some of the other mental models that you had. So you go through the LOI, you're getting into diligence. Thank you, CFO, for going deep in the data room, I'm sure, to get everything prepared. Buyers are looking typically at kind of proven results as well as future potential.
Hmm.
Was there any moment during that process where you thought, this isn't going to get done? Did you have doubt at any point?
Yeah, for sure. It was a tricky moment actually because it had coincided with this period for D2C companies that was very challenging, where Apple changed the cookie policy for Google, for Meta. And so typically on Meta, a lot of our growth came from being able to target customers very precisely. So we had this
Right.
like really great cookie. Cookie is like a thing where you would like, it enables you to target consumers very precisely, right? It tracks them across the internet. And when Apple stopped Meta from tracking consumers across any iOS device, and it's like 80% of our customers were using iOS devices, um, it hurt our ability to target consumers, which skyrocketed our ad costs.
CAC.
And so while we're in
Yes.
this
And
negotiating
ROAS.
process, yeah, like our ROAS is dying, and our CACs are going up. And it actually became a lot of messaging at that point because we're like, trying to frame it to them as like, and frankly, I don't even know the truth because I don't know what's going to happen with this change. Like, are these rising costs and this decrease in profit and decrease in growth, are they a speed bump or a roadblock? Right. And so
Right.
I was always messaging, obviously, like that it's a speed bump and that's going to slow us down, but like we'll be good in the end. Um, which is true. They'll figure out a way, right? They always do. Um, but really, it was a fundamental change in how you market to consumers. It really changed our growth trajectory. And actually, they retraded the deal near the finish line because our metrics were softening. And I mean, I knew that was going to happen, and I was prepared for it. And it was like unfortunate, but like you mentioned, it was just weird timing
Out
and
of your control.
out of our
Out
control.
of your
Yeah.
And for folks listening also, just in terms of unit economics, the importance of understanding what drives growth in your business. And regardless of what business, there's very similar kind of metrics, but CAC, customer acquisition cost, ROAS, return on ad spend, very critical for the sector that you're in.
Hmm.
And I'm curious just in terms of, you're now building, and we'll get into sort of post exit in a moment, but you're building another consumer products company, which is very
Hmm.
exciting. You're getting back into the build. And you think about folks who are building today, and the playbook has changed. From what I've seen, it's changed to favoring more building audience, building organic channels for
Hmm.
acquisition, working with influencers from the beginning as co-founders, even in
Hmm.
businesses to drive consumer. I'm curious, what do you sort of see if you're a D2C founder listening? How are you looking at the playbook? How has it changed?
Yeah, I mean, gone are the days where you could just funnel a bunch of money into Meta, Facebook, and
Input,
Instagram,
output.
and input
Yeah.
output. I also think gone are the days where you just work with a big influencer and that pops you off. That's really
Yeah.
rare now.
Yeah.
I think the market adjusted and became aware of the fact that there was all these celebrities trying to sell them some random eyeliner.
Endorsements.
Yeah, and they were just like,
Yeah.
what? Like, or an energy
Yeah.
drink or crypto.
It's not authentic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like screw
Yeah,
off. Like
no
I don't
kidding.
know.
Crypto.
Um, and so it's like never been easier to build a business. And so there's a lot more competition. And so I think I would advise founders to actually develop a really good product that solves a unique need, and not it's just a lot harder to differentiate on brand, on some sort of wedge. It's a lot easier if you actually have like a product that is differentiated, and I think that's where my mind always goes with products.
Yeah.
um yeah, and influencer stuff, micro works better than macro. um we always like to think of uh, influencer like uh, VC play, where you wouldn't put 100K into one influencer, you'd put 10K into 10 influencers. And one
Nice.
of them is going to pop off because it's all about attention, right? You just need one video to go viral, and that returns the whole investment.
And so
Yeah.
for you, Kickstarter, for example, that playbook that popped the business off, that was the genesis. Does that
hmm
still work, or gone are the days of campaigns like that?
I feel like it's a little in the past now. Kickstarter is still good
Yeah.
for niches like wallets, board games,
Yeah.
watches, maybe. Like, there's like, if you're going after a niche community that has presence on Kickstarter, that's a great spot. But you know, for a lot of other consumer brands, it just doesn't fit the bill. For my new
Yeah.
product, it doesn't really fit. So
But thinking about audience, thinking about the ideal customer profile, and then finding where they are and starting
yeah,
there is what
doing
I'm
community
hearing.
stuff, I think it's just slower. I think you will get the
Yeah.
odd company that can just break through. And you always hear about these companies that they did 20 million, 10 million the first year. And you're like, I'm just always like, how? What?
No kidding.
Like, where did you come from? I think it's a slower build now.
Yeah. And so your build story, just kind of backing up again, you know, you get to the point where you have the deal. The deal, it sounds like it was adjusted due to factors completely out of your control, powers that be, if you will. What was it like to, have that deal closed? From the outside, it looks like this is truly the end of the story. You have the headlines that come out after it's fully done and dusted, ink is dry. But for the founder, it is a start of something very new,
Mhm.
something unexpected. What did that feel like in that moment when you literally checked your bank account, for example? And then what came afterwards for you?
So like, I sold for 65, but like that could have been 90, 100,
Mm,
And so it's like you're like, oh, so it's never as good as you want in a way.
never
Um,
enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
as a very founder attitude. Um, so yeah, the moment I checked the bank account was obviously pretty exciting. I was in, I think it was in New York. I was in an Uber, and I just like got the notification. I looked and I was like, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't
Wow.
know what else
Right?
to say. It's really exciting because you're like, wow, I'm kind of made, at
Yeah.
that point. And
Work optional,
yeah,
I imagine?
yeah, yeah. But like you say that, but then what do you do? You know?
Tell me about that. So I
Yeah,
had a founder who told me that the scariest moment was looking at an empty calendar and going, "Where do I spend my time?" What was your
yeah,
experience like when the dust settled, 6 months after, a year after? What was that first year of transition
yeah,
like for you? Were you in the business? Were you actively working? Okay.
yeah. So I say it's blurred because typically you're not just a clean exit as a founder, right? Like
Yeah.
there's typically some sort of transitionary period. For us, it was a 2-year earn out.
Yeah.
You always earn more on the back of a deal too, right? And so we had a 2-year earn out to stay on and try to hit targets. It becomes a lot of integration into the new company, which takes focus away from the growth of your company. So it's a very tricky balance.
Yeah.
And working within a publicly traded corporation is very different than a startup. And so it was adjusting. I've never worked in corporate, so that adjustment was tricky.
Yeah.
And frankly, we learned that, wow, I understand why I don't work in corporate. I don't like this. It's really hard to get things done.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot slower. It's what you know from the outside. It's what you could expect, right? And so stayed on I ended up staying on for a year and a half. And as the time progressed, I slowly stepped away, right? Gave
Yeah.
more and more of my parts away. And had very, everyone there was really nice at the parent co, and had very frank discussions about, I just don't think this is for me. And
Mm.
um you know I at what point do we step away? And so, yeah, eventually did step away. And pretty much right when I stepped away, I was like, hey, what's next? Because in that time, as I was giving pieces away, I ended up having more free time, right? And for me, I always had hobbies that I wanted to do that I just never had the time for. When I was building the business, I was always so anxious and so stressed all the time. I almost wasn't aware of it. I just knew I needed to take my mind off of it. So the only thing that like really took my mind off of things was like video games, for example. It was like I
Yeah.
could just lock in and just
Escape.
focus on that, just escape.
Yeah.
Um, and something crazy is like when, when I sold the business, like I didn't realize like a year and a half later that like I had so much stress. Like I had this, like you talk about like a monkey on your back or an elephant on your shoulders or whatever the term is, but I had always this deep pressure. I didn't realize that I could live without that. And
Wow.
so, and it
Freeing.
took me about 8 months after the sale for it to really finally go away. And I kind of felt this like freedom, um,
Wow.
which was really lovely. And it gave me the time and capacity to go pursue other hobbies like making music, like learning a new language. Um, yeah, traveling more, meeting new friends. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And that feeling, like that pressure and just frankly, like, in my own build, I felt like it was like this cortisol, like constant living in that state
Hmm.
of fight or flight. And then all of a
Hmm.
sudden, you kind of come down from that and you rediscover how you want to spend your time and this idea of time freedom. So now you have time freedom, time wealth because you've exited and you've come into wealth. What does that feel like to you? You'd mentioned a little bit not having grown up with a lot of wealth. If you don't mind me asking, like what was that like for you emotionally to then go, wow, I am someone who has wealth. I can allocate that wealth. I have time. How do I want to spend it?
Hmm.
What does that feel like?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a little weird to come to terms with almost. Almost
Yeah.
it's like almost like a little guilt to it even.
Hmm.
Um, but that feeling passes. You're like, okay, whatever, like I deserve it. Um, but I think for me it's I don't really I don't care about money, like the cold hard
Yeah.
part of money. Like
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who just love money, like if they could just look at money, they're just like, yeah. Um, but for me, it was just about like, okay, you say time wealth, hobby wealth, like it unlocks
Yeah.
wealth in other areas of your life, right? So I was like, wow, I talked earlier about like what success means, and that's in a business sense, but like a successful life is friends, it's family, it's good food, it's exploring the world, it's enjoying your hobbies, it's not having stress, it's being able to sleep well. And so I think for me, it was an understanding that, wow, I could just not worry
Yeah.
and then enjoy myself.
And live a whole life, one that is integrated in every aspect. On the work side of how we spend our time and work, I would say more around purpose and sense of reason. There's a study that came out that basically said if you do not have a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning,
Hmm,
it can take 7 years off of your life.
makes
So we
sense.
live longer with this sense of purpose. And so for me, when I exited, I had this moment and it wasn't, flashy or exciting, but it was a transition. And it was this view of like, do I have value if I am not productive, if I am
Hmm.
just still? Um, I'm curious if you've experienced something along those lines related to how you think about purpose. Was that sort of something you've had to face around how you want to
Yeah.
spend your time
Yeah, for
and your
sure.
money?
Um, I think after I left, I went on a bit of a journey of self-discovery as well. And in that process, and the best book I read was Man's Search for Meaning.
Mm.
It's a bit, he was a Jewish doctor during the Holocaust. He was at Auschwitz, and he was a doctor, and he journaled about how everyone around him was dying and why. And it was really fascinating because
Wow.
he the theme of it is really that the people who survived, aside from like obviously there's luck of the draw there, but he's like for the most part, he's like the people that survived were people who had purpose to look forward to when they went back, an
Mm.
unfinished musical project that they had, or just he had a photo of his wife, and like he just wanted to see her face again. He didn't even know if she was alive, and it's these moments, these things to look forward to, um, that enabled people to get through.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh wow, I need to find a purpose.
Right.
And my purpose actually became just to round myself out as a person, as to
Mm.
like I talked about like my hobbies and interests and friends and stuff, and just kind of live more of the life that I wanted to. Um, And now my purpose is, build. I love building things. And so now I've integrated that back into my life with more of a balance this time, knowing that, this business isn't going to, my new business won't consume my life. It will be a part of a more full one.
One of the things we talk about often with folks, and there's a study that came out in the States that's around 75% of owners regret the sale of their business within a year. And in fact, many
Whoa.
people try to buy their business back. Yeah, it's high. Are there any regrets? If you could look back and if you could support someone who's pre-exit, who's deep in the build, heads down, full cortisol pumping, in the high of going through pre-exit journey. Is there anything that comes to mind that you'd want to say to them?
It's important to untether your identity from your business. I think my gut tells me that the people who regret selling their business are very deeply tied in their identity to their business. I was to Inkbox, but I think my coach should coach me through this that like you need to untether because you're not going to have it forever, right? And it's going to make it really hard. And so, I was able to form a different identity essentially that was
Yeah.
outside of it. Um, and because of that, I have no regrets.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And to be one of the 25% that doesn't regret, I think the through line there though is just this idea of starting to think about who you are beyond what you do
Hmm.
and starting to think about how you spend your time. And one of the things we do is we'll ask folks, founders that we work with around, you know, I am statements like I am a mother, I am someone who works out, I am, right? I am a founder. And then start to think about that post exit version of yourself early to start
Hmm.
thinking and designing
It's
what you're
great.
exiting to. Because exiting to something is, I think, what folks haven't necessarily thought about because you're so heads down
Yep.
in diligence in the build.
That makes
But
sense.
to keep you grounded, right? And just to explore. And you'll never truly know what it feels like until you're on the other side and you are staring at an empty calendar.
Hmm.
But it sounds like that was really important for you, just that unbundling, that unwinding, that untethering
Hmm.
of your
100%.
identity. And so where have you found your identity now? If you were to really think about
I mean, that's
Tyler
definitely,
now.
yeah. I mean, Inkbox and being, I guess, a founder is still part of my identity.
Yeah.
Um, it's because it's what I'm good at too, and people come to me for advice, and people respect my understanding of things, which is nice. It's nice to have respect in your life in that way. But that's just one part of more of me now, right? So I would
Yeah.
say more of my identity now is tied up with just being, you know, a good friend to my friends and being closer to my family,
Mm,
spending more time with my parents, being a better partner as well.
yeah.
Important, being more caring, being more in touch with my emotions,
Yeah.
not being so stoic all the time. Like being someone who likes to explore the world. I have like an alter ego as a music producer.
I
Uh,
love that.
yeah, I have a performance
I
this
love
weekend, which I'm
that.
excited
Oh my
for.
God.
Yeah, being able to, I can't wait to go travel. I've been learning Spanish, so I can't wait to, every time I go to a Spanish-speaking country now, I speak more and more. And I think the next time I go will be the first time it's like I can have like pretty damn fluent conversations. And I'm looking forward to that being a part of my life where I can go live somewhere else for a while and really live with locals. So yeah,
It's beautiful. Oh, what an incredible moment. And Tyler, this has been a true honor for me to hear your story. I'm curious for the founder, the Canadian founder who's listening, because we're very focused right now on our own backyard and supporting. We have this core belief that great exits can happen here as
hmm
well. But there is a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. There's a lot for starting, a lot for scaling, but the exit phase itself, that's really where we are really wanting to show up and empower founders with access to that knowledge. What would you want to say if there's one thing that a pre exit founder could do today to start getting ready for that eventual outcome? What would you say to them?
I would say it's not a hard line in the sand. It is a very blurry situation, and know that the feelings that you had going into it are going to carry over after it as well, and that it takes time for things to adjust. For me, for example, my cortisol levels are extremely high. It's one example, and I was getting all these crazy muscle twitches that keep me up at night.
Mm,
And they even happened after I sold, and I was confused, you know. At a certain point, I was like, shit, like, do I have Parkinson's or something? So I went to the doctor. The doctor kind of just laughed. He's like, nah. He's like, your adrenal glands take months to reset. So the
Wow.
body, like the mind, it's all interconnected, and you know, what you're feeling now is not just going to magically disappear. What you're going through now is not going to magically just change. It takes time, and it actually does take effort to become, you know, something different after that exit. So,
And it sounds like you're building differently as a result of what you've learned.
oh heck yeah.
Yeah. And so if there's one thing you could sort of say to go backwards and just be like, here's how you might think about building differently. I also built at all costs, truly, to my personal life, to my
Hmm.
health. I literally thought I was like a brain and I was like, oh, my body, I'll catch up in my 30s or whatever, which was such a
Hmm.
mistake because I'm now realizing you need that healthy body, healthy founder. And a lot of
Hmm.
investors and buyers can sniff an unhealthy founder, and that's not great for
Hmm.
credibility as well. What sort of practical advice might you have for someone? Do you have to build at all costs, or can you truly build differently and get the same result?
I think it
What do you
depends
think?
who you are. You know, for my business, I was young and inexperienced, and so what did I have to make up for it was total consumption.
Yeah.
Um, but now, so for younger founders, total consumption, you are younger, you don't have as much to lose. Like, okay, sure, you can risk some years, but like when you're older, it becomes more difficult because you have family, you have more of a rounded life typically. It becomes it becomes really burdensome to them for it to be all consuming. And I would
Yeah.
say find that balance.
Yes, integrate more of that post-exit vision now, right? Like, where
Mhm.
are you if your
Sleep
number
well,
one answer,
meditate, eat well, hydrate,
build
exercise.
find your people
Everyone knows
outside
this,
of
but
work.
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah, the basics, but the basics
yeah.
are so critical. So,
Mhm.
hey, Tyler, thank you so much for coming on. It was such an
Thank
honor to
you.
share your story, and I really think it'll inspire a lot of folks who are listening, that great exits can happen here as well. So thank you. It's a
You're
pleasure.
welcome. Thank you for starting this podcast. It's much needed, I think, in Canada.
Appreciate you. From an idea sparked in the jungle to a $65 million acquisition, Inkbox's story is remarkable, but maybe even more powerful is Tyler's honesty about what comes after. For any founder dreaming of an exit, it's a reminder that the biggest shifts are not just financial, they're personal, and there is so much more life out of your business. This podcast brings you conversations with founders who've made strategic exits, plus the advisors who guided them through the entire journey, before, during, and after the deal. Real expertise from people who've actually been there. Getting to the Deal is made for the Exit Horizon community, a private, highly vetted membership for Canadian entrepreneurs planning strategic exits. We discuss what most won't, how to maximize value, build systematically, and design what comes next. Connect with us, Exit Horizon, on LinkedIn, or reach me at Krystyn@exithorizon.com. I'm Krystyn Harrison. Subscribe to Getting to the Deal wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week.